Hi and welcome to the Unquendor Guitars workshop. My name is Daniel and this is the 6th episode in which I'm building my tribute to the Westone Pantera X390. In this video I continue to work on the neck for this guitar, and to be honest with you, I'm recording this intro after I've done all the work. So yeah, in this video I'm going to show you how I did the 12th fret logo inlay, did the fret marker dots, radius the fretboards, and of course finished the headstock by carving the headstock and doing the Unquendor logo inlay. So without further ado, let's dive straight into this video. Yeah, I here have my inlay, and I've been contemplating this inlay for over an hour whether or not to put it in, because I might not like where the frets are going to cut through the actual inlay. On the computer it seemed fine, but now that's on the actual neck I'm starting to have second doubts, or I'm starting to doubt myself whether or not it would be a good idea. So yeah, maybe I'm just going to insert two tiny fret marker dots like on the original guitar instead of doing the inlay. Maybe put this inlay into the body where the sticker is on the original guitar, but yeah, I'm not sure at this point. And sometimes you just have to start over, only a bit smaller. And before anyone asks in the comment section down below, yes indeed, this is an Incra protractor in metric, and you can find an Amazon affiliated link to this protractor in the video description down below. So to get this tiny little inlay exactly centered in the 12th fret position, I've put a piece of masking tape at the 12th fret, this is the 12th fret, and marked the center of the neck. On the computer I made a secondary outline of the inlay, including two center lines, and now I can align this drawing with the center lines on the neck, stick this in place using some super glue. Then I'm going to very carefully cut out the tracing and use my Dremel to route the cavity for this tiny inlay. And just like that, the tiny Inlay logo is done, and I'm glad I decided to do a very small logo instead of the bigger one. And yeah, I'm very pleased with how this one turned out. Next up is making the fret position markers, and to do so I'm going to use this 4mm diameter aluminum rod, cut it into small pieces, drill some holes to correct fret positions, and glue them in place using some super glue. Now with the fret dots also installed into the neck, it's time to start radiusing the fretboard. And to do so I'm going to use my ultra long 12-inch radius sanding beam. I made this beam myself in a previous video, and if you haven't seen that video, yeah, go check it out. It should be on my channel, or I'll leave a link in the description down below. I've loaded the sanding beam with a 120 grit sandpaper. I'm going to clamp it to the bench and by hand sand in the radius nice and consistent all the way along the length of the fretboard. You can make a jig if you haven't done this before, to make sure you keep your neck or your fretboard parallel to the sanding beam and get a nice and consistent radius. Yeah, I've done this so many times, I'm fairly confident I can do this by hand. Usually I collect all this dust, but in this case it might be contaminated with aluminum, so unfortunately I have to throw this away. But if you're sanding a neck without inlays, yeah, keep the dust. It really helps when you have to do some repairs or do some filling on your inlays. In this case I can also already see some glistening aluminum, so I'm going to throw this away. But it is important when sanding in the radius you keep your sandpaper nice and clean. It will last you a lot longer and gives you a better result. To help me gauge how far I am and to help me keep everything aligned and nice and consistent, I'm regularly going to make some marks using a white pencil, some cross hatching along the fretboard. Like so. And now when I'm sanding, I can keep track of where my pencil is disappearing and where I'm taking off material, and where I still need to take some more material. For instance, here I can see the pencil is already gone and not on the other side, meaning that I'm removing more material on this side of the neck at the moment than I am on the other side, so I have to adjust my pressure just a little bit. So keeping this in mind, I'm going to continue until I have a nice and consistent radius all across the fretboard. And of course I'm going to also periodically keep checking if the fretboard is nice and straight using my straight edge. And to check if the radius is, let's call it, centered to the neck, what I like to do is take calipers and take the little protruding end on the end of the calipers and check the height on the corners of the fretboard, like so. Set it on one corner and check it against the other if that one is higher or lower. If it's too high, it means I need to shift the radius over to the high side. If it's too low, I have to sand away the other side. And if they're equal, then the radius is nicely centered to the neck. In this case, they're equal on this side. And what I like to do is get the other side very close. Usually this side, the 21st or 24th fret side, the body side of the neck, will be a tiny bit lower due to the fact that this section of the neck is wider. But I like to set my necks that they're fairly even, so I have a nice and consistent thickness of the fretboard along the entire length of the neck. And that means I have to usually sand the headstock side of the neck a bit further down. And of course check with a straight edge if the neck is nice and straight. Well, it pretty much is. And to make absolutely sure everything is nice and straight and as perfect as I can get it, I once more going to mark the neck with some cross hatching. And this is something the more you do this, the more sure you can be of your progress. I'm constantly cross hatching the fretboard when I'm working on the neck. And I'm going to use my leveling beam with 240 and 380 grit sandpaper and stay parallel to the center line with the sanding beam and very gently sand away any marks. And by doing this ensures me that my fretboard is as straight as I can get it before putting in any frets. And at this point I'm just using the weight of the leveling beam. I'm not pushing down on the leveling beam or on the neck, and that's because I don't want to introduce any cupping or bowing into the neck. I want to have it without any tension. Now at this point, and I don't know if it shows up on camera, there's a couple of pencil marks still visible in this area and right here. Now don't make the mistake of trying to remove these marks by adding more pressure where the marks are. This is actually a low spot, so where I need to remove material is right here at this side and at this side of the neck. So I'm trying to constantly go back and forward with very even pressure or even very little pressure until the marks are gone. After the final pass with leveling beam and 320 grit sandpaper, I know my fretboard is perfectly straight and there's a nice perfect radius in it. And now I can use some higher grit sandpaper to really polish this fretboard. So I'm going to start with 400 grit sandpaper and a small sanding block, and really polish this fretboard, going up the grids, starting with 400, 600, 800, 1000, 1500, all the way up to 2000 grit sandpaper, and then I'm going to finish it off with some tissue paper and really get a shiny fretboard, hopefully. And although this is 400 grit sandpaper, at this point I'm still keeping the radius and straightness of the fretboard in mind, and that's why I'm still using a very straight sanding block. Next step is to carve the headstock to match the profile on the original Westone guitar, and it basically is a round over of this edge and here the front or the top of the headstock, so it will be a round over. So I'm going to take my Iwasaki carving file and very gently start rounding over these edges. So the headstock carve is done and these edges are now nicely round over. I'm very pleased with how this looks thus far. And now it's time to determine the Unquendor logo inlay in the headstock. And I've inserted some of these tuner locking nuts. And I prepared a couple of sizes of the Unquendor script logo inlay, and I can determine what size I can fit on this piece of the headstock. This one seems to fit rather well, maybe a bit larger. I think I can fit this one right here, so to say. Yeah, this should fit, so I can now cut this design from a piece of aluminum, position it on the headstock and do the actual Unquendor inlay. The next step might require some explanation. I'm going to use some dust and some super glue to fill in the gaps, but because I'm going to stain the headstock, I want to make sure that the gaps I'm filling are also in the correct color, and when using regular dust and super glue it might be that the stain won't hold in the areas I filled up around and inside the inlay. So that's why yesterday evening I pre-dyed some dust. It's just regular maple dust with some blue stain, which I used to dye this dust, and I can use this and regular super glue to fill in the gaps. That's it for this week's video. I'm very pleased with the end result, and yeah, if you like to follow along with this build, make sure you are subscribed to my channel and you have the notifications turned on so you get notified when I upload something new. Yeah, that's it. I hope to see you all in the new video, but until then, have a nice week.